welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to today's seminar. It is great that we have Richard here today for giving us the seminar. I think everyone knows Richard well. I don't need to introduce a lot to him. So, but I think I still need to give a brief introduction for the newcomers of his experience. Richard has been working on the photovoltaic research and education for more than 30 years, since 1990s. From 2003 to 2013, he acted as the head of school of SPRAY, leading the advancing photovoltaic research team and education program at UNSW. In that 10 years, the school the students' number has reached more than 600, and the SPRAY alumni changed the face of the national and international face of the photovoltaic industry. Richard now is the Chief Operating Officer of ACAP, and the premier Australia Photovoltaic R&D Partnership, and advisor to the India National Center for Photovoltaic Research and Education, and the editor of the IEEE Journal of Photovoltaics. His current research activity are life cycle assessment of the photovoltaic technologies and the photovoltaic recycling. He has supervised more than 200 students, including the UNSW EU project, educating through practice while bringing light and power to the remote area in Vanuatu. So today, Richard will share his story and experience the project he did in Vanuatu. So the stage is yours, Richard.
Thank you, Ko-Wen, and thanks for organising this, and thanks, Rob, for filming and doing the technical support. So just need to make one correction. I should have corrected my bio, but I'm not the editor of IEEE Journal of Photovoltaics and editor of that journal anymore. I've stood back from that. But my main job is the COO of the Australian Centre for Advanced Photovoltaics, ACAP. But I'm not speaking on behalf of that organisation or in that role, but just as an academic of UNSW. Today. So about a little side project we've had since about 2007, and in the latter years of that been strongly supported by Vanuatu Community Aid, particularly through Jackson Yakapas, who's our strong supporter and friend over there, that without whom none of our work would be feasible. And so let's get into it. So actually I can't read my own slides without my glasses on, so I'll do that. So what we've been doing is we've been taking undergrad and postgraduate coursework students to do design projects as as their thesis projects for the engineering degrees that they're doing here at UNSW. And some of those students have been able to travel with me to Vanuatu and implement either their own project or a different project. It doesn't usually work that we can do the timing doesn't work out that we can do the implementation of their own design project, but it's more common that they're gathering data for their project and end up with a design which might be implemented by me and other students in the future. So the sorts of projects we'll be doing is photovoltaics for standalone power in small public facilities, particularly in schools, dispensaries, aid posts. So aid posts are very small health centres in villages. Very small, very simple, but that's where a lot of the babies are born. It's the first place that people are going to when they're sick and they need some support. And in recent years, water supply, water pumping, some gravity fed, but also photovoltaic water pumping has been in quite high demand. Ram pump, a mechanical water pump, we've just had one attempt at that, and it worked, but but 2 cyclones a few months later weren't very kind to it, so it's not in good shape now. We've also done micro hydro power in one village, and I'll tell you a bit about that in the presentation. We're quite interested, and we've had some students exploring possibilities for small-scale geothermal exploitation. So there's an active volcano, Mount Yasser, on the island, and it's got 24/7 energy in great abundance, but lots of barriers to getting at it and using it in a way that we can get good value from it. But we haven't given up. And we've dabbled a little bit in the hopeful future transition of the diesel-based grid on that island to away from fossil fuel. So I'm going to give you a bit of a slideshow, really, lots of photos and not much words about what we've been doing over those years. So the island we're talking about is up here in the Pacific, so sort of Vanuatu is sort of between New Caledonia and Fiji, about the same latitude as Townsville, where Tanna is. That's the little island. So this one here, the kidney-shaped island at the bottom here, and this one. And so we've got here on the west coast, it's much drier than on the east coast because of the prevailing winds bring lots of moisture to the east coast and particularly the southeast of the island, so it's very wet there. The grid is only on the west coast, and most of the island has no electricity grid at all. So this island is 40 kilometres long by 19 kilometres wide, 550 square kilometres area. The highest point is down in the southeast of the island, and it's 1,084 metres. Those prevailing winds I mentioned come from the southeast and bring lots of moisture, which gets dumped around that mountain, around those mountains, really. And a rain shadow on the west side. Very beautiful. We love to be there. It's just a glorious place to be. It's a South Sea island paradise, but it has its issues. The sort of projects we've been doing is ones that's illustrated here. So this is our students putting second-hand solar modules on the roof of a aid post in one of the villages. That village is Saka, I think, from memory. And inside there we'd have lights, LED lights, a fully DC-based system, so no inverter. Inverters are quite unreliable in that hot, moist, dusty, acid-laden sometimes with the volcano emissions affecting some of the villages. So avoiding complex electronics like inverters is wise if we can do it. And so we can do the basic phone charging and lighting without going to AC and high voltage. Also intrinsically safe as well. I think I've already done that bit. Another aid post. We get into the local culture as much as we can. So this is a festival that is only held every 5 or so years, comes with little notice to us in the West, but it's very exciting, a 2-day festival that is as colourful and as life-filled as you could dream of. We climb volcano, have a look inside. That volcano's got very excited in the last few years, and it's been quite devastating to the communities who live close to the volcano because it's been dumping ash on their gardens. Malnutrition has been an issue, and all the health problems that go with that, of course. It's driven a lot of families to move to Lenical, the main town, in much bigger ways. So it's sort of driving people out of the rural villages. We get bogged and stuck in the mud, and we camp in amazing places So this is a cute little place where we can see the volcano. Actually, it's terrible weather though there. So we engage very closely with the local community. We make good friends. And the students, primarily, what happens through this is the students learn. The students learn to, through that engagement, they also learn to get their hands, to build things with their hands, and they learn to experience the pride and joy of making something work that's really useful to people. So that's an image there of students working in the room just next to us here. So we do some of that preparatory work here. We used to do all the assembly in situ, but it's often dark and dirty and difficult and time consuming, so we try and get that experience here these days. So this is our first project back in 2007 and 2008, where the little village of Lowen. So you see we put roof guttering for water supply, some tanks, and over here you can see a PV module that is, I don't know if that's going on the screen. Doesn't show on that screen, sorry. It's, over on the left there's a PV module that's supplying a lighting system in that. That's a project that was started by Anna Bruce, and I sort of picked it up and took over it. So there's that PV module that lasted quite well until 2015, when Cyclone Pam was unkind to it, and we've since replaced that lighting system with a upgrade. And the local people were very appreciative, and we had a little ceremony and at the end there. From that we asked around and made some more contacts, and this we'd been introduced by Mary O'Malley, who used to work in the media office in the Chancery here, and she'd had a lot of experience on this island and had a lot of good contacts, so she was able to introduce us to people who allowed us to learn about projects and learn what was needed. So this is a village we've been working in a lot, and we'll come back to a couple of times in the talk today. So this is at Emaki village in that wet rainforest in the southeast of the island. It's the regional centre at that part of the island, and this is effectively the local hospital, but technically it's called a dispensary. It's supported by the Department of Health, but it's quite basic. So you can see there's solar power there that one was not installed by us. It was quite heavily impacted by a big banyan tree. We chose not to initially do solar there, but to do hydro. So, and I'll talk about that hydro system in a minute. Really because the shading. The trees are beautiful, they're lovely, but they're not really not very helpful for getting solar energy into buildings. So students then, in particular, this is Chris, who's now the CEO of 5B, a sort of second stage startup here in Sydney, and he saw the opportunity here of doing hydropower instead of solar, and this is the village water supply tank. It was getting water through a pipe that was coming from 60 metres up the mountain. Very good, reliable water supply. So he and his colleague the following year, Eden, who's also active in 5B, they built a hydropower system, and that gave 24-hour, 7-day a week, no nighttime shutdown. So small battery is a big advantage of that over the solar in cases like this. That worked very nicely until Cyclone Pam. So they built a mini grid based on that hydropower, distributed to the two schools, the secondary school, the primary school, and really just an aside, that secondary school has got to be the most beautiful campus of any educational institution in the world. It's just lovely. The medical clinic and the nurses' quarters as well, and a couple of other places. So made big difference to that place. So so Eden came on next year, and they actually did a different, slightly larger hydropower system that wasn't dependent on the existing water supply line. They put in a dedicated penstock, and that's the turbine that was running from that, and that was the water that comes out of that turbine was just returned to the river. So that's just below the village. So we have, see here, this is installing the pipe over a chasm, one of the many chasms along the way. So very rough country, very difficult country, and but went very well. So there's Chris and Eden, and they, I hope, remain very proud of the great job they did there. So those SMA inverters have been through hell, really, with cyclones and unroofed buildings and still we're still hoping next year to put them back into service in another place. This is me and my daughter then. My daughter is still my daughter. We were doing a solar crop dryers in Port Vila, not on a different island. The main island was our next project we did in 2010 through to 2012 with a master's student. That's my daughter there. So we built 2 solar crop dryers that were used by one of the businesses there, the Carver store, to preserve local Pacific fruits and nuts. Unfortunately, that was run by a guy who's passed on now. So it's sort of fallen into disrepair, but got immense amount of interest, and from ministers down, and this guy here with his back to us is Charlie Longhua, who was running the Carver store then, and this is Talia, who was the master's student. Looking at that. So Cyclone Pam was devastating. 2015, huge cyclone that destroyed that building where, it did a lot of damage to that building where the hydropower inverters and headquarters were. And there's our battery. This was taken a few years later, after those batteries had been sitting there discharged for a long time, so they were just scrap metal really. But lost the windows, lost the roof, rain over everything, and the hydro was not working for several years after that. It put trees down over our pipe, so we did a survey there a few years later, and I think there were 13 damages to the pipe that were all very serious, and got to the point where really we thought we'd have to completely start again, and we struggled to find the resources to do that. There's our penstock that used to be strung across a valley, but now it's just broken. So set that aside. We went back to doing the lighting in dispensaries and aid posts again. So it's at Iquaramanu, which is just on the side of the volcano, just on the south side of the volcano. This, by the way, I used to really enjoy getting water out of that particular water tank, and because it's sort of very crisp and sharp, cold water, and it's very nice in the summer. Until I found out later that it was actually full of acid that comes from the volcano, and that gives it its crispness. So I suddenly stopped drinking that. So the community came together there. That has worked for many years with our lights in that building. That's the that's the map inside that building how they keep track of the villages that they service and where people come from. So people are coming from many kilometres away to get health services and to have babies at that dispensary. But it's not a very well appointed place. It's very basic. But lights make a big difference. Another one on the south coast, Quaraka. This is the sort of common sort of building that we're seeing as the village aid post. Might have concrete floor. That one does have a concrete floor. Sometimes they have dirt floors, and but very basic services. So we've got, putting here the picture on the left is one of our students who's installing a distribution board for our DC supply, 12 volt DC supply for lighting and phone charging there. That's that building there amongst all the coconut, right on the coast. Absolutely blissfully beautiful place. So that's us walking along the beach to the local creek so we could have a bath and along the beach. So there's lots of scenic benefits at the place. We've done some training of local people a little bit, as the level of mathematical knowledge and understanding is quite low in the community, but getting better for the younger people. So we have taken some second-hand solar modules that we've taken off a school, donated from a school in North Sydney. And we've shipped them across, and that's our sort of bread and butter for our projects. We're working our way through them as we do projects. So that's in 2018. We've still got a few of those left. So at Imaki School, we did some basic testing of those to check them after the shipping, because the shipping can be a bit rough on them, and getting the students involved in doing that. And one of our students, Belinda, she has developed a solar power guide for the local people in Bislama, the local language, and in English. And this is sort of addressing some of the very basic issues. So there's lots of little solar power systems, privately owned systems, but they tend to be, very often they're not installed very well or optimally. The wiring is too thin commonly. There's just insufficient understanding of what's needed to make them work well. There's also a sort of an expectation that you can't do anything without an inverter, which we're trying to undermine by promoting our DC systems. So addressing those basic understanding issues of different things, what's an inverter do, and when do you need it, for example. And that's one of the little boards that we make here now at UNSW, and we ship them across and install them. So we prefabricate those here. So that's presented in both Bislama and in English. Back in 2018, some more aid posts, a dispensary at Port Resolution. We've seen that picture before, I know, and a school at Lamlu as well. So Lamlu is one of the Catholic mission schools in the middle of the island that we've been doing a lot of work on, and had lots of goes because our budget has been too limited to do what we really need to do. So we've been working little bit by little bit and doing it classroom by classroom. We've seen that one before too. So this little picture here is at Lamlu School. More aid posts later on. So this one here, we needed to. This right on the south coast of the island. We couldn't we couldn't do what was the cheapest option, and that's to put the PV on the roof of the building because of this mountain in the background where the sun is blocked out until very late in the morning each morning. So we had to find a compromise location that was a bit less shaded. But getting the hardware for the mounting systems there was incredibly challenging and expensive. Another, that's Itaquai, the aid post right on the very eastern end of the island, and this is Laos, which is right on the northwest of the island, the very far side. So over the years we've made lots of friends. We've got very engaged with the community. Our work, although very small and low impact, really has been much appreciated by the local community. And we've back in 2020 that's in January, so that was the last time we went before we had a bit of a break. We had a ceremony where we were sort of honoured and effectively included in the local community in a way that was very honouring. So actually, I also note I'm wearing my tusks, which are great honour to have been given by the community. I don't get that many times to show them off, so thanks for coming. So our students and we were included there. Also included in this is some of these people are actually the Peace Corps volunteers, American Peace Corps volunteers, with whom we've had a history of engaging and overlapping and sharing information as well. They are just now coming back to Vanuatu after the closures of the borders for a few years. So we're hoping to re-engage with them and try and do things together as well. Another cute little aid post with our solar lighting on it now, and another one. And this building with the green and yellow building is not an aid post, but it's a laboratory in the north of the island for malaria detection. So people with microscopes and lighting to go with that we needed to supply the power for. And we have a great time. we really enjoyed. The students just revel in it. It's tough and dirty, but it's a lot of fun. So this is our first water supply project that we've had. It worked well for a while, but it's got some problems now that we're going to try and address when we go back. And that's we had the support there of a couple of guys from a solar installer company from Brisbane, and they did what I probably couldn't have done and got that going in the day. Worked like Trojans in the heat and dirt and eventually in the dark to get that pump going to the point where we thought it was working, but there wasn't any sun by the time we got it fixed. So we had to wait sort of on tenterhooks until the sun came up in the morning to see if it was actually going to pump water, which it did. So it was very sweet. And that little building is the last aid post in which we put lights before the border shutdown that came from COVID. And it's probably the cutest aid post in a gorgeous little village. And so that's out of order. That's back in that middle area hospital. So after Cyclone Pan destroyed the hydropower system at Imaki, so I'm just checking the time. We were a bit stuck, and when we had a look at what we'd need to do to repair that, we'd need to replace pretty well everything and start from scratch, in effect, and build everything stronger as well, and that was just way beyond our budget. So what we've been trying to do instead was to replace the hydro input with solar input, and because we had the modules. So we made a good start on that. So we got as far as having this one rack of PV. There was going to be a second row of that, so to feeding into the same inverter as well. That old SMA inverter that I showed you before, we had a lot of trouble getting it communicating with it. So it's we had some parts missing to allow the communication. It's got no keyboard, so we couldn't actually set it up. So it was very frustrating. We've got a workaround now, but we sort of got it got pushed aside a little bit in that a story I'll tell you in a minute. Another organisation came in to help there and rebuilt the hydro, or built a new hydro. So that solar is now feeding into a hybrid solar hydro system. So the borders reopened in July 2022, and I'm not going to go through all those little things, but we had lots of repairs, lots of things had got out of their best condition, I think. And our interests had changed a little bit too, so we're much more focused on trying to do something about the grid, because this country is intending to be net zero by 2030, I think. But there's a lot to do to get there. There's a lot to do to get there, and the diesel-powered power stations are a big part of that problem. So we've started to have a look at that as well. So we've had lots of the same sort of projects with a mix of geothermal has been coming into the fore again, lighting projects and water supply projects as well. And this little one is one I'm very proud of. So this little aid post has had I can't really remember when we installed that, but it's been many years. They've looked after it very, very well. We do get problems where people borrow the batteries at night and take them away and do other things with them, and the batteries have degraded. But some of the villages have been amazingly careful, and we're sort of looking for ways to encourage and support them. So I'm told I didn't get permission of this little boy to show his photo, so I've got to put a big black spot over his face. But the children in that village just mobbed us. So the aid post was just full of the children wanting to get involved, and this little guy particularly was very, very keen, very enthused by the possibilities of what we could do with solar power and electricity. So after the borders reopened, one of the projects we were interested in is trying to explore the geothermal. So there's actually, if you stand on the top of that volcano and look in, you can see magma. So there's immense heat available, but making it accessible and finding those sweet spots of places where you might do, for example, coconut copra drying for oil extraction. So finding the right place where that's feasible to do, accessible, and the temperatures that we can reach in a range that is not going to kill us and hurt people by accessing it, but it's still going to be effective enough to do that food dehydration task. So this student's very happy that we actually got 80 or so degrees there, but the location, so it's right on the beach. So it's hot water that comes out of the rocks on the beach at port resolution. That's working again on that Amaki the Amaki solar system. I'm trying desperately to get that going, but we didn't quite do that. That's the inverter for the water pump system on the other side of the island. And this green picture here with the student in the hat, we're measuring the water flow for a intended ram pump system. So ram pump is a very sweet technology. It works without any electricity input. It uses the water hammer effect and the flow of water to pump a small fraction of that flow to a greater height than it originally came from. So we're trying to get water out of this dark valley. So solar pumping is quite feasible, except that there's no sun down there. And so the photovoltaic modules would need to be at the top of the hill and in the sun, and the cables that would have to come down to the pump are quite challenging expense. So we're still struggling with getting that right. We did install a ram pump at that location, and but then 2 cyclones came last year and were very unkind to it. This is Immergie village on the southeast of the island, where we did that hydro power system before and that solar array I showed you. And this is an installation that's been installed by Eco Generation, a New Zealand company, with funding from a donor, a US donor, and they have really done hydro very, very well. They're very expert at it. We're very amateur. We do our best, but they do it very beautifully. And so they've incorporated our solar array into their hydro. The solar that I showed you before has been incorporated into their hydro input. So that has a hybrid hydro solar power supply for that village, and it's very well supported with electricity supply now. We stay in contact with that company, and we're engaging with them and trying to find ways to do more things together in the future. So that's our solar array that is supporting that hydro as well. I'm not going to go through all those, but this is in our project in January 23. So we're working on the hydraulic ram pump, bore pumps for just simply pumping water out of the aquifer for water supply at schools and villages. Doing lots of site surveys. So coming back after the big break, we didn't really have a bank of projects ready to go because we hadn't been going. So normally when we go, we both work on projects that have been planned for in the past, and we also do planning for future projects. So we'd had a big gap, and we couldn't have been doing that future planning. So we had a lot to catch up on. So a lot of surveys and checking and measuring and data collection, and with a bit less actual doing, I think, than usual. But also checking out the geothermal resources, which I think we still need to learn more about that. And we went back to a very remote place that we went to many years ago, and put the lighting in this little health clinic, and found it was still working perfectly after all those years. That community had been very careful. They hadn't used the power for anything else other than what it was meant for, and there was one of the light switches had broken, but we were able to replace that. And I think the external light had not stood the climate as well, but we'll replace that next time we go. So we're currently doing, I have a student now who's doing planning for a hydro power system that might be implemented by another organisation that would supply that health clinic and the school in that village as well. So this building here is the grass roof building is a school, a custom school where community members teach the children about the traditional ways of life, the old ways. And so we've put some, not old ways, but very modern LED lighting in that building for, with the solar on the adjacent building, the adjacent residential building. And we've done a water pump that we got going at a school in the centre of the island, with Jackson just testing the water's okay. And this is back in January 23, so we haven't been back since then. And this array is for another water supply water supply from bottom of the mountain for villages which are about, I think 90 to 100 metres elevation. And we're not actually at the moment planning to be able to pump all that way up there, but we at least pump the water out of the ground to avoid them having to drive down with water containers and hand pump the water out of the aquifer, and then drive back. At least the pumping out of the aquifer will be done, and we'll get as close as we can to a good place where they can collect it more easily now. So we got a bit stymied by a cyclone with that one, so we weren't able to finish that project in January because a cyclone, a small cyclone, only Category 1, came while we were there. We were safe. We had a good plan to keep us safe, but it did damage to the roads across the island. So some of our materials, and particularly our pipe, was located on the other side of the island, so we couldn't go and get it. So that remained unfinished, and we'll finish that when we return next month. So we're intending to go back there in August. It's the waterfall that we're planning to have a little hydro around, so that will support that village I mentioned before. That's our cyclone. Okay, we had two of them then. And since then there were two much bigger cyclones that have actually done a lot of damage to our gear. And a nice sunset picture which tells us we're coming near the end. So we've just added up all our projects. I won't go through them again, but we have a little website that one of our students made, and I need to do a lot of work on keeping that up to date, but I don't always find the time. So it will be updated one day, but it's a bit out of date now, I'm afraid. And just some acknowledgement of our supporters over the years, and particularly to the Australian Government's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade's new Colombo plan, which supports many of the students to go for the last several years, to the School of Photovoltaic and Renewable Energy Engineering here at UNSW, and particularly to Vanuatu Community Aid at the other end in Tanna has been immensely supportive. So those three particularly are the big ones at the moment of current supporters. The UNSW Institute for Global Development, when it was funded previously under a few years ago, was very supportive and helpful for us, but it's not able to do that so much now. But very grateful for all that past and present support. And just in case you know anybody who'd like to help us out, they can do that tax-free. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Richard, for sharing this amazing story and experience you had in the islands. You said you heard that there might be little impact, but I think the work you have done has great impact to the local community. Do you have any question for Richard?
You mentioned using second-hand solar panels to be cost effective. In terms of the batteries, what did you do? Or just second-hand lead acid, or did you have other options?
No, the batteries have all been new. I think second-hand batteries are very expensive to ship. Everything is expensive to ship, and since the world has changed in the last year or two, everything is very expensive. So shipping has become extraordinarily expensive. It's gone up a great deal. So no, we've always bought batteries from a dealer in Port Vila. We also get the racking, the aluminium racking we get there, because the import-export overheads are quite extreme. It takes a lot of fuss, a lot of time. It's just unaffordable. So we buy what we can in country. We've bought, but to do that is quite challenging, because it's been businesses don't have catalogues online. Most don't have websites. Some have Facebook pages that use as websites, but nobody has a list of prices. Most don't take Australian dollars or any other currency that the university will deal with. So they need cash, and to give them cash, I need to be there. So it's hard to do anything ahead of time, and so we need to find interesting workarounds and ways to get things.
And I had one second question, which was the volcano you mentioned. Do you have any data or information on how the ash affected the performance of your systems? Like, were they still getting some output, or like panels covered with ash, or was it just the whole thing was down?
The ones downwind get a lot of ash. So one thing we've done in the past is to get extendable aluminium handled window washing gear from Bunnings here in Sydney, and then ship them across, so to make it easy and also safer for people to clean them easily. So in some of those sites, daily cleaning is necessary for ash if they're downwind. So yes, very big impact if you're downwind of the volcano, yes. But manageable.
You first.
No, you go first.
Go on.
Please.
After you. After you.
A great range of, a number of projects, but also a big range of projects. Very interesting, with several different renewable energy approaches. Of course, the big issue seems to be the cyclones coming through, which happen on a very regular basis. And I think you mentioned that there has to be some greater investment on more robust systems, etc. But are there some cheaper alternatives to improve those systems and make them more cyclone resistant? And is that something that you're sort of investigating to try and see if because that would really help things along if they could, for instance, the mini hydro system, if that could be cyclone resistant, then that would be a incredibly valuable resource. So
yeah, I think it's possible to do it. It's just expensive to do it. So if everything, if you bury your pipeline, then yes, but actually you can't get across the rivers. Then the chasms you can't get across. But yeah, of course there's engineering solutions to all those things. You can have concrete blocks and stainless steel support wires and all sorts of things. It's quite feasible to do it. It's just expensive to do it. And, so with the the aluminium ground mounting systems for photovoltaics, we specify cyclone, for the highest wind rating that is available, and they're good. They survive. But things blowing into PV modules, you can't do much about that. They get damaged. Those very strong winds tend to twist the modules too. They contort them around, and so you can get cracking as well. It's tough country. It's very, very, very harsh climate, and
it's great that the initial system you put in back in 2007, was it? That's still working. That's amazing. Is that somehow proof from?
No, it's been replaced. Sorry, the very first one was that got destroyed in Cyclone Pam, it wasn't dead, but it wasn't very well either. The module got twisted by the wind and it was cracked. So not quite that long, but yeah, we've had some long-lasting systems, but mainly roof-mounted systems have survived. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Hey Richard, thanks for the talk. Very interesting, very thought-provoking. Gavin took my first question, so that's great. My second question was about the second-hand panels that I donated for the project. Great use, but just wondering if those panels go through quality control before you ship them over, and have those second-hand panels performed well throughout the years for you.
Yeah, particular, the ones those shot modules that I showed you before, they're actually quite old now. But they came off a school called Redlands in the North Shore, and I knew from the teachers there, I knew from the staff at the school that there was nothing wrong with them, that they were fine, that the system was working fine, it had been monitored, it was in good condition. But they were re-roofing the building, and for other reasons they weren't going to put those modules back on. So I sort of knew we were starting with good material. Those modules have 50mm aluminium frames around them, whereas sort of 35 is pretty common, normal now, which of course is good to save the aluminium, but actually it's less rigid than they used to make them. The glass is probably, I think, is thicker than they were. They were built like bulldozers. They're strong. They're very, very tough modules, I think, very high quality German-made modules. And we didn't do any. We did some cursory testing, I guess. We looked at open circuit voltage and short circuit current before we did it, and we did it again with the school students in Amaki after we'd shipped them as well. But yeah, it's not fully tested. But we do test when we install them. We test, are they generating? so each one, and actually we had one got broken en route over there, but other than that we've had no failures of those modules we're aware of.
The reason I mentioned it is because we do some luminescence imaging testing of modules in the ACDC group, which yeah, it might be worth chasing up if you want to.
Yes, I look forward to having you come across with your drone and check them out down the trail next time. So we are actually very open to having other staff and students come with us as well. We probably can't pay the costs, but if people want to come along and join the fun, absolutely happy to have you.
I've got another one, if I may, unless anybody else is. You mentioned that the country, Vanuatu, I guess, is aiming to become 100% renewable by 2030, I think you said. Yeah, that seems a very ambitious goal, but also a good opportunity, perhaps, because at least in principle there should be some possibility of funding coming from that. Maybe from the Vanuatu government or possibly even the Australian government, maybe. But it also means that there's going to have to be quite a lot of work on integration of the various different renewables and the extra costs that will be involved with that. Is that something that you're sort of looking into down the track for?
Yeah, I think what most of our projects have been addressing people who never had energy supply. They never had electricity. So it's not actually replacing diesel or anything. So we're in a way, we're not contributing to that. We're helping people, but it's not quite in that same way. We have had, and I have one student currently who's working on looking at putting as much photovoltaics as we could possibly do on the hospital, the grid-connected hospital at Lenakal, and to the greatest extent possible, taking that, which I think is the biggest load on the grid, to be supplying a lot of that behind the meter. But some interesting situations where it's all there's lots and lots of hospital buildings, small buildings, but all separately metered. So it gets challenging to share between buildings except through the grid. And but there's a new grid operator now, so we look forward to fruitful discussions with the new operator of the grid. So it's a concession that now has a new operator after another one has stopped doing it after many years. And I guess we have tended to do, we've tended and we probably will continue to do mostly off-grid projects because there's less bureaucracy involved, I think, and less other people involved, and so it's easy path for students to get things done. Doing low voltage is sort of fundamentally safe for our students and for the other people too, which is also attractive. But it's also addressing the people that sort of tend to get forgotten or gets missed in all the schemes, and these are the people who live in the little remote villages who are hard to reach, and people from afar tend not to even know that they know that, well, of course they know that they're there, but it's very hard to service them. So the off-grid needs will probably remain our main focus, I think.
So Richard, just back on the second one. First, we will be happy to do imaging maybe before you send them. But if the transportation is big cost, does it make sense to send second-hand and not new one, just because the price of new one is quite cheap?
Yeah, it's there's a couple of things going on, I guess. So possibly, yes, but most of the modules that are available there are not very high quality modules. So it's not a very well informed community in terms of the customer base. Many of the modules, most of the modules are in the businesses in Port Vila don't have anything to show they're IEC 61215 accredited. They have warranties that can be as short as 1 year or 3 years. So reliability of using that sort of stuff is a question. I don't really like my students to see me doing that, to be honest, of putting that sort of stuff in. And there's some market for properly accredited modules and systems, but they're really for the phone companies, for the radio companies, etc. And it's very expensive. So I don't know. It's the same question is in my mind as well. Yeah, but I guess when as transport has got more and more expensive, it's becoming less and less attractive to do that. But that transport is expensive. If I'm buying them there, they've had that transport built into the price already anyway. So everything has got expensive. So yeah, I don't know.
So maybe two other questions. Like first, so what is the budget for project like that? And
yeah, it's very small. So I get I apply each year for small amounts from the school, and my family's been very generous. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade funds the student travel these days, so they getting grants. They have been getting grants for $3,000 each, which covers costs. It's nice. So they contribute to the land transport, which is one of the more expensive costs that we have, just getting around the island on hired vehicles, paying for the fuel, which is extraordinarily expensive, and accommodation and food, and it's we have we're very open to.
So are we open, for example, to like a campaign to raise funds, or it's not something that UNSW policy is allowed?
No, we could do this. It's time and aptitude, I think, is really the issue. So I should be doing this more.
Maybe one that's not related to renewable, like just on the culture. So COVID had huge impact on everyone. How was COVID's, what was the impact on the community? And
well, the borders were shut for, I think, 2.5 years until the middle of 2022. And it was sort of interesting when we went back there in August 2022 for the first time. It was, it sort of felt a little bit like it didn't exist anymore. Of course there was COVID in the community, but there's lots of sickness in the community, and I think maybe there wasn't as much testing, but the level of concern was in the community was remarkably low. I thought so, very relaxed about it. So it was like we'd sort of come out of the darkness into the light for a while. But of course it must have been rife in the community. But
Okay. If we don't have any other question, I think we thank Richard again for the good talk.
thank you, Colin.
Thanks, Eric, for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, Colin.